Hello, and welcome to Arts and Entertainment.
With Chris and Randall.
I'm Chris,
I'm Randall.
and today we're going to talk about writing, specifically learning how to write in all the various ways you can be a writer, writing programs, classes for writing, books for writing, playwriting, screenwriting, novel writing, every kind of writing, not every kind of writing, but a lot of kinds of writing. And, if you're right now thinking about where you want to go to study writing, this is a great episode. And if you've ever just been curious about it, I think you'll find this an interesting episode. But before we begin, as always, please like, share, comment, and subscribe. Randall, what's a good way of reaching us?
We'll check out our website, chrisandrandall.com, and you can check out our Facebook page for the show. There's a lot of ways to check us out on our website, a lot of links.
So today we're living in an era where a lot of people are going to school or taking adult ed classes or reading how-to books on how to be a writer. It's an interesting phenomenon. Now, Randall, in the research I did on this, the earliest academic version of this was in 1888 at Harvard in their English department. Professor George Baker had a class called the 47 Workshop in Playwriting, and the workshop was there as a forum for the performance of plays developed within his English class. And he taught some very famous people like Philip Barry, S.N. Burnman, Hallie Flanagan, Sidney Howard, and Eugene O'Neill, among others. And Thomas Wolfe, who wrote Look Homeward Angel. He then published a book called The Dramatic Technique in 1919, which became the first book on how to write a play. He talks about the codification of his principles of the well-made play. Another famous writing teacher in the 1960s was a novelist, fiction teacher named Wallace Stanger, who also taught at Harvard and at the University of Wisconsin. But he settled at Stanford University, where he founded the creative writing program. His students include George V. Higgins, Thomas McGuane, Robert Stone, Ken Kesey, and Larry McMurtry. So in the 20th century, writing became something that people could actually go and study. Now we're living in an era where there is a great proliferation of academic writing programs, adult ed writing programs, online writing programs, book writing programs. So today, right, Randall, we're going to explore your options. Which is the best way to go, for you? Do you take an academic writing program? Do you take an adult ed writing program? Or do you just kind of cobble it together on your own in a DIY way? Now, I just want to make a disclaimer. This is not about talent. You and I had this discussion. How do you describe, for you, what is your feeling about talent in writing?
Well, my feeling about talent, and I'm sure a lot of people would disagree, is talent is just a skill. So I mean, you could be like a talented carpenter. That means you're a good carpenter. What makes you a good carpenter? You're good at putting a piece of furniture together. You know how to do
So
it. And why are you so talented? Well, why you have so much skill? Well, it's because you did it so much. It takes practice.
the talent takes time. And creativity, I think, is a form of talent as well. Would you say, Randall?
Sure, yes.
And creativity takes time. So I just want to be very clear. We're not going to talk about which option is going to make you talented or which is going to make you creative. That is really a longer journey that you will be on. Instead, and nor is this about success, because success is an individual outcome. All of these approaches can result in success, but due to the competitive nature of the arts, none are a guarantee. So what I'd like to do, Randall, today is just focus on which approach will leave a prospective person better prepared for the challenges of writing their work based on our personal experiences as writers and our friends who are writers. So let's talk about what we're going to cover today. We're going to talk about literary fiction. Now, literary fiction is opposed to, say, genre writing. How would you separate those two, just for the layman?
Okay, well, it's a tough one because in cinema, TV, like everything is genre.
Right.
And when you talk to somebody, I've had this discussion with people who work in entertainment and TV, and they, and I say that, yeah, in literature, in English literature, genre is considered like an inferior area of writing. So if you're writing like romance or horror or action adventure, something like that, that's like that's inferior to, like, say, like literature, like drama. Um, but in the cinema, it's like everything is considered to have a genre of some sort. So it's kind of like it's hard to discuss it because it's
So
so
it's,
different.
I think when we're talking about books, literary fiction is the kind of thing that is not normally a detective novel or a horror novel, right? It's normally about somebody going on a personal journey. Ulysses by James Joyce, The Great Gatsby.
Well, in
Um,
cinema, you would call it drama, but in literature, you just call it fiction, and then everything else would be a genre.
right. So
So
anyway,
it's weird.
what we're going to cover are both literary fiction, which is more, I would just argue, non-genre fiction, uh, genre fiction, screenwriting, TV writing, sketch writing, and playwriting. So there's going to be a bunch of creative writing things we're not going to cover. I'm sorry about that. It's just we're going to try to keep this within what we know. Uh, Now, one of the most common ways of going about it, it's not the only, we're going to cover three. We're going to look at academics, we're going to look at adult ed, and then we're going to look at what I would just call self-teaching or do it yourself. So both you and I are products of academic writing, meaning that you took writing in college as an undergrad. I have a graduate degree. Maybe you're thinking, if you're watching this show or you're listening to this show, oh, you know what? I'd like to get an MFA in literary fiction or an MFA in playwriting or an MFA in screenwriting or television. You won't get an FFA in script writing and you won't get an MFA in writing genre novels. But if these are the things you're thinking about, or maybe you're 18 and your college is offering creative writing class, or you're looking at colleges, let's talk about the pros and the cons. So I think, and certainly if you disagree with me, Randall, let me know. Or if you agree with me, let me know. When you're in school as an undergrad or a grad, so one of the pros is, just accountability, right? As a writer, one of the hardest things is just to meet your own deadlines, right?
So you're talking about what are the pros of going to school
Going
for
to
writing?
school. Yeah, you're getting a master's in film or playwriting. I have a master's in playwriting. You have undergraduate work in writing. So, when you're in school, meeting your deadlines, I mean, you've got a grade to get. So if you don't meet your deadline, you're going to fail the class.
Well, when you're just starting out, it's good, yeah, to have some reason to write, somebody to write for, have an audience, even if it's just your classmates,
Yeah,
a
your
teacher.
classmates. Yeah, it's great. I mean, you all know what it's like when, like, I did take undergraduate playwriting. I'm going to assume it's the same deal, right? When I was in college as an undergrad, uh, you'd bring in material and then everybody would read it.
Sure, yeah.
All right.
I mean,
Weirdly enough,
a creative writing workshop, that's what you do.
yeah, you don't do that in grad school, weirdly enough, or not at my grad school, but in my undergrad experience, that's really helpful because, you know, you went to USC. That's a very good college. I went to Lawrence, a good college. Your peers in that class, they're going to be almost at your level. You know what I'm saying? If it is an undergraduate experience, they're going to be kind of a little wet behind the ears, but good students. If it's a graduate school experience, they're going to be a little more seasoned. But everybody's at their own at a similar level, and that helps a lot. I think when you're getting input from your fellow classmates, wouldn't you say?
Uh, Maybe. I mean, I don't know.
I mean, they're bright kids. They're kids who have decided. Certainly, I can say from my experience in graduate school, if not an undergraduate, that yeah, when I was in grad school, all of us really took writing very seriously. So if I wanted notes from my friends, they were incisive and they were thoughtful. And if I was working, I had a problem in the story, or they had a problem in the story, we could come to each other and beat it out.
Yeah, sure, that
Just
can
a,
help. Yeah.
it's a very supportive community because, like anything you do, it's a group effort, and it's a collaborative effort. You're writing your own works, but now I'll say this much too. I went to graduate school for playwriting. I had the opportunity to have plays performed in grad school. I got to work with directors and actors, and I got to do workshops. So I got to see how my work would read on stage. Did everybody read a complete, you studied short stories, so I'm assuming everybody would read another person's short story?
Sure, yeah. Yeah.
And I'm assuming your instructor probably had some control over how discussion was done.
Well, most of these workshops, the writer's not allowed to say anything or even ask questions, and you just listen to the discussion of your work, which is interesting. I mean, personally, I don't feel like I got that much out of it.
Well, we'll get to that in a sec because we're also going to do the cons. But give me a second to just mention a few of the other benefits, and then I promise. Your instructor normally is a professional writer with
Mhm.
experience as a writer, so that helps. Normally, most schools offer internships, depending on what you're trying to do as a writer. That can get you great contacts and fellowships as well. So, internships and fellowships for a playwright involve working with the theater, getting to know artistic directors, understanding the process. I would assume for people who are doing film, I've done a little bit. I went to film school for a little while as well. You're working with production companies. Maybe you're a reader of other people's scripts. You're writing coverage. But these opportunities that are affording to you are very specific to being in college. Also, uh, it allows you for networking and making professional connections. Wouldn't you say? I mean, when you're in these programs, doing these fellowships and internships, or going out for these contests built for students, all of these things are geared to help launch you. Best case scenario, Randall, I'll say if you go to grad school, is that if you get the right kind of degree, you can be a teacher. If nothing else, you can teach this stuff. So, okay, let's talk about the cons. You didn't, go right with it. What do you think is the downside of pursuing it in a college level, be it undergraduate or graduate?
Well, there's the time you're putting into it. That's time you're never gonna get back. And a lot of people that go into these programs are young, so when you're young, it might be a better time when you're really young to like actually just start working somewhere. That's a choice you'll have to make, but because a lot of businesses, they would rather hire you the younger the better. So that's something to consider.
I'm a little confused. Can you just elaborate? Are you saying if you're an undergraduate and you're taking a writing class, you're young, and that's not a good idea because you're young because you could be working? I'm a little
Yeah,
confused there.
it's well known. Businesses have a bias to hire young people.
Right, but in this discussion, you're in college already. So I'm just like, are you saying don't go to college and just get a job, or are you
yeah,
saying,
that's what I'm saying.
all right, well that's a very interesting way of looking at it. I want to ride on something else you said though, which is obviously for undergraduate. Yeah, most people who go to college, not everybody who goes to college is young. So they're between 18 to 22, and they're not really, and you could certainly say as a writer at that age, your life experience is pretty limited. I was the youngest person in my grad program. I was 23 when I started graduate school. The average age of most of my fellow students were between 29 and 34. So they had been out in the world. They did have a bit more of a level of experience. And in that sense, if you're thinking about going to graduate school and you're not in your 20s, but you are in your 30s, I think in fairness, that's actually, and this is the section for cons, but I will say it's actually, I think, a plus because I don't know about you, Randall, but I do feel as a writer, the older you get, in many ways, the easier it is to write.
Well, that it sounds like you agree with Fran Lebowitz. I think she says something like, "There's no like great young writers because you have to actually know something." You know.
But the opposite of that is that's true if you're going to be a novel writer in the fine arts or a playwright in the fine arts. If you're learning film and TV, especially TV is about being young. And when I was at NYU, uh, I was taking a class one summer, but with some undergraduates in TV writing. There was a girl who was in a school of dramatic writing. She was 19. She did an internship on a soap opera. The soap opera was looking for young writers to write their teen characters. And she got hired on her internship. This was 30 years ago, and she got paid $90,000 a year.
Well, did she finish her education?
I actually don't know, to be
See,
honest
I
with
would
you.
say, at that point, it's like, why finish your education? See, this is my point. It's like there is a bias for certain industries for hiring young people. So it's like it might be a better idea to forget going to college. Is what I'm saying.
Well, I mean, look, she wouldn't have gotten that job had she not gone to college, Randall. That's the
Possibly.
key. No, because she wouldn't have gotten the internship. She got the internship through NYU. So
All
that's
right.
the door that opened the door. In general, these programs can be competitive. They're expensive. They can leave you in debt. I was just reading about a guy who went to Columbia Film School who spent $200,000 in student loans and makes about $30,000 a year. So if you do the math, it should only take him about 100 years to pay off his student
Yeah, I
debt.
want to say something about the competition. Okay, I mean, when you go into these programs, you can do the simple math right away. I mean, you can see how many classmates you have. Okay, I think at USC I had maybe 15 to 20 classmates in my program. I mean, we're all going to we're all going to be successful writers in some capacity. Like every year, they're going to graduate 15 to 20 successful writers. It's not going to happen. I mean, in all the other colleges that are graduating writers, it's not going to happen. So, I mean, just do the math. I mean, uh, it's
But certainly at SC, you had a greater opportunity because you're in Los Angeles. SC does turn out every year quite a few people who do go into film and television.
I mean, I guess theoretically,
But
just
no, it's a top school
well,
to go
look,
for
think of it this
film.
way. Think of it this way. You want to do the more math.
Yeah.
Uh, there's already people writing. I mean, all the slots are already filled. I mean, for every TV show, every movie, somebody already wrote that script. I mean, there's already people working and writing, and then the colleges are going to churn out another like 15 to 20 people every year. I mean, and every
I will
college.
say
So you're talking
that
about hundreds. You're talking about thousands of people getting churned out
I
every
will say
year.
there you're right about that. There is no job placement. There's no guarantee of success. I think you're right. It's a structured time commitment. That means that you're going to have these classes over several days a week. And if you go to graduate school, it's a commitment of several years consecutively. That said, I certainly know people who went to USC or NYU or any of these places who have built careers because they went to a school, a really top school. So this is where I think, you know, let's talk about our specific. You were at SC, and what did you study at SA and creative writing?
Well, I ended up getting my major was English with emphasis in creative writing, which is the closest thing I could get to. I didn't really want to go to college. Okay, my mother wanted me to go to college, so I wanted to make her happy. So I went. I graduated. I wanted to study cinema television there, but I couldn't get into school like a lot of people. It was very hard to get in there, and I took a bunch of classes in the school of cinema and television, except for like pretty much I took all the classes you need for the major, except for like the three production classes, and then you're supposed to take these three production classes, one every year, and then you at the end you're supposed to have like a student film that you can use, to get work or something. So I wasn't able to take those classes, and but I ended up going into creative writing, and I always wrote short stories anyway. I always wrote fiction. So when I was in high school, so I got English with emphasis in creative writing was my degree, and yeah, that was it. What was the other question?
No, that was good. I mean, I studied playwriting with an MA in playwriting. I also studied sitcom writing, and that actually was quite an experience because I'd end up going to NYU School of Dramatic Writing because I did want to learn TV writing from TV writing professionals. I noticed that in the world of theater, everyone's trying to get a job on TV, and that was an opportunity to learn TV writing from an actual executive producer who was working in the field. That was an interesting internship. Let's move on, though. The other option that I think is a lot more people should really consider, and I think it's a little bit more open-ended, is what we call adult ed. Now, just to be really clear, what do I mean by adult ed, Randall? I just mean that these are schools or theaters or whatever. There can be nonprofit or for-profit that offer you classes in screenwriting or novel writing or sitcom writing or sketch writing or playwriting or just about any kind of writing. I definitely would say normally for any of these programs, all you need is the ability to write a check. Uh, they're offered both in person and online. I've done both. Can be offered by a university, can be offered by a for-profit school. You definitely have flexibility with time. You get to take classes when you want to. There's really no accountability if you just don't finish a class. That's on you. Weirdly enough, I have found in my experience at like UCLA Extension or the New School of Social Research or the Writing Pad, I've actually found that you're more likely to get a working professional in an adult ed class than you are in a university. I know we're going to get to our instructors later, and I know you're going to say something that refutes that, but I have to admit I actually found that when I was taking adult ed classes, the teachers were both teaching on the side while they were also looking for work in their field. And they actually had they just had more of an idea of what was going on in the world. So, the cons of that are your fellow students will be at all levels. You're going to have limited access to your instructor for input on your work. No accreditation to become a teacher, though you might get a certificate. Certainly, I think that the courses tend to be less. I'm not saying that, the courses are a little less expensive, though if you decide to pursue a certificate, you'll end up spending money, just nowhere nearly as much as you would spend if you were getting an MA or a BA, an undergraduate degree or a master's. So you and I both have done adult ed. Let's talk about your experience at the IO West. What is the IO West, Randall?
Well, the IO West doesn't exist anymore, but it used to be like a satellite theater of the IO from Chicago.
Improv Olympic?
Yes. Well, it's not even called the Improv Olympic anymore because the Olympics, they got in a fight with the Olympics.
Oh.
And so they had to change their name to the IO. And then the IO West was the one in Los Angeles. And now the IO doesn't even exist anymore. I think they got bought out or something. I'm not sure if they're going to exist anymore after this.
What did you study at the IO?
Well, I originally took sketch writing there. They were the only there's all these comedy theaters in LA, and they teach usually they're improv theaters and they have improv classes and then they have improv shows. Now, the IO West was the only place that had a sketch writing class. And I think it was just because of one of the teachers who was there. He was a writer on SNL for like a year, and he helped put that program together. There were only 3 levels, 3 classes, and I took them.
Oh, wow.
And there were 3 different teachers I had, and they were all great except for the last one.
Oh, well, but you learned how to write a sketch, right?
Yeah, it was. You know what? It was good. It was good because all the teachers most of the teachers are good. I mean, they really. I mean, sketch writing is a very specific kind of thing, and it was good to learn from them.
Well, I would say, I've been taking adult ed classes in creative writing now for almost 30 years. It's just kind of frightening to think about. Certainly since 1991. I just took some classes in essay writing, which I'd rather not add into here because we're not talking about it. But yeah, I've taken screenwriting classes at UCLA Extension. I have taken TV writing classes at UCLA Extension. I've taken screenwriting classes at the New School. Uh, I think the thing that I took a playwriting class at a little theater in New York City just when I got out of grad school, because I got kicked out of grad school. We'll get into that in a minute. And the guy I had for my playwriting class was a guy named Bill Talbot. And Bill Talbot was the editor in chief of Samuel French. He had helped Aaron Sorkin put together A Few Good Men. He helped him convert a screenplay into a stage play. He's just a brilliant guy. And I learned probably more from him in this, I don't know, 8 weeks for $180 class, which I took 3 times, than I probably ever learned. He was probably one of the greatest writing teachers I ever had. How about you? So, who is
Why was he so great though? What can you talk about him a little bit?
absolutely? He was at the time probably in his 70s, because he was the editor in chief of Samuel and French. He had literally 40 plus years of working with playwrights behind his belt. He had seen them all. He had worked with everybody. He could read a play. He taught me how to read a play. He, I was a good writer at the time, but he helped me make my play better, because he was the editor in chief in Samuel French, and Samuel French has a very prestigious festival of one act plays. I was able to get into the festival of one act plays. I did not win. Actually, I was defeated by my alma mater, which is a very interesting story, because my former graduate advisor, who was the worst teacher I ever had, he was all about winning the Samuel French. So he ended up winning uh, by having his other new prodigy defeat me. That's an interesting story, but I learned so much from Bill, because Bill had taught so many people, and I wouldn't have had run into him in a university or an MA program. Even when I was at taking screenwriting at the New School, I had a guy who had written Sometimes the Runner Stumbles, whose name is blanking on me now, but was a very famous playwright in his day. And again, sometimes in my adult ed, teachers have really been the best. So you
Yeah,
have
it's
a guy from
true.
Saturday Night Live. That's pretty impressive. Was he a great teacher?
Uh he was a horrible teacher.
Really?
I have stories I could talk about him maybe another time, but
Well, without no, but tell me now, without naming his name, why was he a horrible teacher?
yeah, he he just didn't seem to understand any of the material or have an interest in it or have an interest in his students, and he would actually get a job like on a TV show or something because he was acting at the time, and he just wouldn't show up for class. I mean,
Oh
and
wow.
that happened a lot. He wouldn't. We were supposed to do a sketch show at the end of like our class, at the end, like at the end of a level,
Yeah.
and he was supposed to be there. I mean, he would even like. There were times when he would even, say, oh, he would work the lights or do something, and like he just wouldn't show up. I mean, he did that a lot. I think for my class, he didn't show up for like half the class.
Oh
Like
Lord.
he got a job in Chicago or something, and he was gone for like 6 months. And the iOS had to struggle to fill his slot with somebody, which they did. But yeah, he was terrible. He wasn't, and when he was there, he wasn't a good teacher. I
My
remember
graduate.
I remember he would just show us video of his old sketches when he was in
Yeah.
class a lot of times. I don't think he even knew how to teach. He didn't know what to do. He didn't know what to do. But I did have good teachers though who before him. Um,
And you got some good tools out of it, right?
From his class, no. His class
No,
was
no,
a
from the
complete
other
waste of
teachers.
time all the
No,
time.
from the other teachers, I'm saying.
From the other teachers, though, yes. And it's funny because the other teachers weren't nearly as successful as he was.
Yeah.
Well, I'm curious though because I know you told me that you feel like one of your old teachers, and you just talked about him. I think just like kind of had a detrimental effect on your writing.
Oh yeah, my graduate advisor in playwriting, uh, unlike other writing teachers, we never would read anyone else's work in our class. He did teach the well-made play structure from George Bailey. He did, weirdly enough, I had a number of productions of my work while there. he went to one reading of one of my works, but never saw any of my work actually performed. Which, in fairness, when you're writing a play, how well the work you're writing transfers onto the stage is kind of an important thing. But he kicked me out. I still got my master's in playwriting. I just didn't get an MFA, which would have been a terminal grade. So I ended up doing 2 years instead of three. And it's funny, he was an alcoholic, and so was my other excellent teacher, an alcoholic. But one of them was an excellent alcoholic teacher, and the other one was a terrible alcoholic teacher. I also had a number of famous TV writing teachers, and I would agree with you that one of them, I don't want to say his name because he's just done a lot of great work, but as a teacher, he was just okay because I had this discussion with my girlfriend who was studying improv, that she said that, and I think this is really true. It's very easy to think that just because somebody has had a lot of success, she took a class where they had a guy who was a writer on Superstore. And she said, he's an okay teacher, but not a great teacher. And I'm thinking to myself, just because someone is a working professional does not mean they're going to be a great teacher. And the converse is, just because somebody has never actually successfully, Bill was a great writing teacher, but to my knowledge, I can't name a play that Bill Talbot wrote. So yeah, you can be a really bad writer and a great teacher of writing. Or Wallace Stanger is a pretty okay novelist. I've read his work. Pretty okay. Nowhere nearly as good as Ken Kesey or Larry McMurtry or Thomas Gawain or George V. Higgins as students. But that's my point, is that I think when you are considering either adult ed or you're considering a university setting, your instructor, I really believe, now you had a great instructor at SC, right? You had T. Congression Boyle. What was he like?
Well, he's kind of legendary at USC. He's been like running the writing program there for years. He all the students love him. He just basically does like a very traditional writers workshop where everybody writes short stories and then everybody reads them and then we talk about them and that's it. And I remember one thing he used to do was he wanted everybody to write comments about all the stories you read. So like, like, I don't know, like a page of comments maybe. And
Yeah.
every now and then he'd pick one to read. And I tore apart. I like really hated like another guy's story in the class. And I don't know. I don't know what got a hold of me, but usually I'm not so mean, but I just tore it apart, right? This guy's story. And it was just kind of cliche and surfacey and the characters are very, I mean, it was like a story about a dollar bill being passed around. So there weren't really any characters. It was just about like all these vignettes that lasted like a few sentences. And it was just, I don't know. It was good, but it wasn't good, and I just ripped it apart. And then Boyle, he chose to read my review of this guy's story. And I felt so bad while he was reading it. I don't know why he did that to this day. It was like the meanest review of any story ever in the class. But he chose to read it. I don't know. The discussion it generated was not good either. So I don't know. But he was willing, Boyle was willing, he was willing to get real, and you felt comfortable criticizing other stories in his class. And yeah, I mean, and he took an interest in the students, and he like anybody who's good at their craft, he knows what makes something good and what makes something bad, and I mean, and some things are totally subjective. He understood that too. This is another thing that like a lot of teachers, I've noticed a lot of writing teachers, art teachers too, even, they get hung up on things that are like subjective, as like, if they don't like it, then it's not good, that sort of thing. And, he didn't get hung up on that. So, yeah, so he was, I mean, he's a legendary teacher mostly because he really liked the students, you could tell, and he he talked to the students, and yeah, he's a nice guy.
And a damn fine writer. A
And a
damn fine
good writer, and he wanted you to be a good writer.
So you got some good tools from him.
I don't know if have you ever taken a short story workshop before, Chris?
I actually have with Frank McCourt when I was in high school.
Well, maybe you could talk about it, but the short story workshop is like, to me, it's just like it. I don't know how it can be helpful. I mean, it's just because you are getting feedback, you are getting your stories read, you do have an excuse to write something. I mean, so that's those things are good, but the feedback you get from such a limited audience, I don't know how much it helps you. I mean, I mean, short story writing is very like subjective, let's say. And I mean, like, if you're doing something like sketch writing, maybe even poetry, I mean, there are certain rules that it's good to follow. you
Yeah.
know, playwriting, I'm sure. There's screenwriting. There's certain rules that are good to follow. Um, it'll make your work better. Because your work needs to be performed or whatever. But when you're getting into stuff like fiction and short stories, I mean, it's like you're getting into very subjective areas of art, I feel. So
Well,
I feel there's a limited usefulness to
I
short
will
story
say this
workshops,
about
fiction
every
writing
writing
workshops.
every writing teaching program I've ever been on. When I'm learning the genre for the first time, be it playwriting or short story writing or screenwriting, whoever I have as the first couple instructors, even my bad instructor from grad school, I'm going to learn a lot from them because I'm learning the fundamentals. And then I find that as I progress as a writer and I keep on taking classes, no teacher is going to overwhelm me now with fundamentals because I know the fundamentals, but certainly different teachers can teach me one or two cool tricks that will slightly up my game, and that's fine by me. I think when you're starting out, an instructor can definitely make or break you in that they can make you feel you're a good writer or a bad writer. But I honestly feel that even if you go to an adult ed program and you have a bad experience, or an academic program and you have a bad experience, it doesn't mean it's going to break you as a writer. It just means you're going to have to realize that not every teacher you're going to get is going to get you and your sensibility. And that's really an important thing to think about when you're pursuing either an adult ed program or a graduate or undergraduate program is does this teacher that you have get your sensibility? Are you guys communicating with each other? Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, you're making a good point. I mean, and it didn't happen so much to me, but I did see it with other people in workshops where I could tell, like, the teacher just didn't get their work.
Yeah.
And I could see that their work was going for a certain kind of thing, and it's just the teacher just didn't get it. The teacher had never been exposed to something like that, perhaps, and yeah, so there's definitely some degree of subjectivity there, and it's like okay, it's like, how do you be a good critic, right? How do you
Right.
I mean, a bad critic will just say, I don't like this type of story, so it sucks, right? But a good critic will look at the work and try to see what it's trying to accomplish, right? Look at the work on its own terms and see if it accomplishes it. I mean, it's a difficult thing to do if you don't like that type of work. I mean, Pauline Kael once wrote, the famous film critic. She once wrote about Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the original.
Yeah.
She wrote something like, I don't know why somebody would ever want to make a movie like this, but it's probably the best movie somebody's ever made like this.
But I'll say this much, if you're vibing with your instructor, it's like nothing on earth. My undergraduate playwriting professor, Fred Gaines, he got me into graduate school. He alone, off the strength of his recommendation. Bill Talbot got me into NYU. He alone, off the strength of his recommendation. So one of the benefits of more for going to academic school, but maybe this is true for adult ed, is if you can find a teacher who really connects with you, they'll be your avatar, they'll be your champion and your mentor, and it can have phenomenal results. And I cannot undersell it. But now I'm going to undersell it because we're going to cover the third, what I like to call the do-it-yourself approach, which is books, pre-recorded online courses, software programs. You really see software programs mostly for screenwriting, but I'm sure there's software courses. I do have masterclass, so I have actually taken some of the writing master classes. I am right now reading Save the Cat by Blake Snyder, which is, I think, now the 1500th book I've read on screenwriting.
Well, what do you think
I've done all three when it comes to TV writing and screenwriting. I've done all three of these.
Well, what do you think about all these screenwriting books, these how to write books?
I will say this. I'm only going to tailor it right now to playwrights and screenwriters. Uh, Lagos Egre wrote a really good book on the art of dramatic writing. Anyone else who ever wrote a book on how to write a play, if you get that, Lagos Egre is very dense and it's more philosophical. If you buy any book on how to write a play by a contemporary writer, go for it, because in fairness, the structure of writing a play is really simple. Very, very simple. If you're going to write a script, I would suggest Screenplay by Sid Field because it's the most basic. I would then get maybe a few other books. Pre-recorded courses, or what they call asynchronous learning, probably has some benefits too, especially if you get to send your work to your instructor and then they give you notes. If it's just a pre-recording like a master class, I'll be honest with you, I'm not a big, I have master class. I've just now paid about $200 to get 2 years of master class. I enjoy it, but if I was going to learn, I would never recommend it as a way of learning how to become a writer. You will get some great insights philosophically, aesthetically, but it won't give you enough of the fundamentals. I think you're better off, but you can do it. Certainly one of the benefits of this, Randall, it's the cheapest possible option, right?
By reading a book or taking a class, watching a class video? Yeah, sure.
Videos, books, software programs. You're going to need to get Final Draft no matter what if you're a screenwriter, but there's also software programs, not like Final Draft, that literally help you put a play or a movie together and TV show together. That's good. They're cheap, relatively speaking. You get to go at your own pace. You can live almost anywhere. And I'll get back to that because one of the things I did take there's now more and more classes in adult ed that are being offered online, in person, in real time, not asynchronous. So you can live anywhere now and you can take a class at UCLA Extension or the Writing Pad or probably even NYU. And I certainly think that's pretty cool. But if you've got a book, you can literally live anywhere in the world, even without a computer. You've got your stuff. And certainly I have heard stories of people who just used a couple books on writing to get their novel done, to get their screenplay done, to get their stage play done, and had it sold. Now, the cons of that approach is, of course, there's really no feedback unless you hire a coach or you join a writer's group, which you still can do. And you're going to have to hold yourself accountable, right? Because when you go at your own spot, there's no penalty for not missing a deadline. And your networking options are pretty low. But that said, have you read any books on writing?
Mostly read grammar books. I don't think I've finished any. Well, wait. Oh gosh. Yeah, okay. I've read some of the like classic ones. I can't think of them now. Sure, like a
Poetics
couple.
by Aristotle, or
Yeah, I've read that one.
which I don't really recommend if you're going to be a writer. I think it's great work, but I don't think it. Character is plot. Plot is character. Congratulations. Now you need everything. But Aristotelian drama is not important. I said it. If you don't agree with me, too bad. I have your own podcast. But certainly now I will say this much. I think that no matter whether you do just buy some books or software or you do adult ed or you do a degree, at some point, you're going to have to do it yourself. You know what I'm saying? I know you're going to have to publish that book. You're going to have to stage that play. You're going to have to shoot that TV pilot or movie.
You have to get practice somehow, and that's what people get out of classes a lot of times, okay? Just a lot of practice, a lot of writing. But yeah, if you're motivated, you can do it on your own.
And at some point, you're going to have to do it on your own. I know a lot of people go to school or take these classes, and as soon as the class is over, as soon as the degree is over, they never. I've done it too, by the way. I'm not above it. I got a couple unfinished essays that I just studied earlier this year. I still got to finish them. So I'm not above it, but I'll talk about. So I've done two things or three things. I've done a couple things where I just did it on my own. And I didn't go to school. I took maybe some classes, one and the other one I didn't, but eventually I just did it myself. I started a company on toast making, helping people write wedding toasts, eulogies, and ceremonial birthdays and other personal tributes with a partner of mine. And that was just based on my experience as a writer and writing training. And no one taught me how to help people write toasts. That's me just trying something out and doing it. Another thing I've been doing is storytelling, which I did take a few adult ed classes, but after a while, I stopped doing that. I would just write my own storytelling. For those of you who don't know what it is, it's these 5 to 8 minute personal narratives or anecdotes about something that happened in your life, and they're built on a theme. So The Moth is one of the places where you might hear a 5 minute story. Solo shows are similar to that way. They're just longer versions of storytelling. So I've been doing that now for a number of years, no longer using teachers, just a group of writers I trust, just working on it, workshopping it. And in fairness, I think I've probably written more stories and spent more time as a storyteller. And I've certainly spent more time as a toast writer and a helper of a storyteller than I have as a screenwriter or a playwright. You know what I'm saying? And how about you? I know you too have some do-it-yourself stuff with. Tell us about that.
Well, when I got out of college for a while, I thought it might be fun to be a journalist and get into journalism, and so I was able to convince an editor of a weekly newspaper in a very small town near where I was living at my mother's house, and so after college, and it was in Ukaipa, I convinced them to let me write for the newspaper, and yeah, so I helped. I did layout and I wrote, and
And
I
you didn't
never.
go to journalism school, right?
No, no. I just, there were two like old veteran journalists who worked there. I got their input. The editor helped me. I just learned by doing on that one.
Learning by doing. It's one of the best ways to learn anything, wouldn't you say?
That's the only way to learn, really. I mean, you got to do it eventually.
Eventually,
Uh,
you're going to have to do it. Now, tell us about your time at Top Story.
well, Top Story was started. The teacher that I said was a horrible teacher. He started this sketch show at Iowa West. It was originally Big News, and then it turned into Top Story. And he was a terrible teacher, but he he started a sketch show that lasted like over 10 years. And originally I wrote sketches for it, and then I got a lot of sketches in it in the beginning, but as time went on, I became a videographer, and I started recording the show and putting it online. It's online now. Um, yeah, so that was another one. You learn by doing. It's a really good experience to write something and then watch actors act it out. Especially if you don't, especially when you don't have any input on the process. You just write something and then it's gone from your hands, and then you
Like
see what's done to it.
yeah, my girlfriend, she comes from improv and stand up, and she she shot a short film. She had never shot a film before. She wrote the script. She hired people, but she learned from that experience. I have another friend of mine whose background is. I have two friends of mine whose background are in screenwriting, and they converted their screenplays into books, and they were able to sell their books with no previous training in prose writing. They were just able to translate those skills. I have a couple other friends. Our friend Bill, who has been on the show, Bill Gukwa, who's been on the show a number of times. He has quite a few film credits, and he never went to film school. He worked on the Universal lot. He had a partner who worked on the Universal lot. They saw a lot of movies, and they just taught themselves. So there's really no, I will say this is where it's different. I do think that if you are trying to write a play or you're writing literary fiction, it'll always help you to go to a graduate school versus just doing it yourself. But if you're writing just about anything else, like, a genre novel or a screenplay, Yeah, you don't have to go to school to do that. You can totally do that on your own. You can write a, you know, someone who was a sitcom writer, right? They didn't go to a sitcom writing school.
Yeah, well, I know someone that's I met her when she was a waitress, and she's a showrunner now.
Right. So I looked
And
up her biography, and no, it says she's an actress and a stand-up, but there's nothing about a background in writing.
she did stand up like 3 times. I mean, she did stand up like hardly anything. I mean, yeah, but she didn't have any background in writing. She basically just was a waitress. She met people. She did a stand up a few times, wrote some jokes, and then they liked her. They put her in the writers' room, and now she's a showrunner.
I know a number of people who got to become famous TV writers by simply doing stand-up comedy, brought in to do punch-up, and then just moved up the ranks. But also, you know, for every happy story, we have a friend, you have a friend who got into the CBS diversity program. Let's talk about that.
Well, the CBS diversity program is just, I look down on any kind of anything that's called diversity. It's like it's all it's always a red flag to me. Because if you're trying to be diverse, you're doing something wrong. You should just be diverse. And everything my friend told me about this program, I was right about. All my suspicions were proved correct. And yeah, he went through the CBS diversity program. Is just basically a sketch showcase, and it lasts a year, and you get to say you did it, and that's about it. And I don't know if anybody's actually had a career bump from it. So yeah.
I have a friend who wrote for Twin Peaks, no background in TV writing. The original Twin Peaks. I know a number of people who've just, I'm not saying you shouldn't do this. Go to school by all means, but you can definitely do it. Now, I would say, if you're going to do it yourself, first off, all of the art we've just mentioned, Shakespeare didn't go to school for playwriting, right? The great, Julius Epstein didn't go to school for screenwriting when he wrote Casablanca. Originally speaking, this is a fairly modern conveyance. So,
well, how did these people learn? These people learn because Shakespeare learned to write plays by watching plays. Novelists learn to write novels from reading novels. That sort of thing.
So,
you learn how to write sketches from watching sketch comedy. It's that sort of thing.
So yeah, obviously, definitely the pros of the do-it-yourself approach is, your motivation stronger because no one is no one's telling you to do this. You're not paying to do this. You have no deadlines. You're doing this because you've chosen to do that, and that's important. You have less gatekeepers. You're not asking for permission, and as you just said, you learn a lot by doing. Look. We didn't go to school for podcasting, and I think it shows. And yet we continue to put out podcasts.
I don't know if there is a school for podcasting, though. But yeah.
Oh, there is. I looked it up. There's places that will train you in podcasting.
Oh, my gosh. Things are getting ridiculous now, but all right.
Look, it could be helpful. We might get a following, but why would we want to do that? We'll just Joe Rogan it. But the cons are, and these are cons, because I did speak to my friends who did go and do it themselves without formal training, and they did say they definitely made a lot of more mistakes than they would have had they not gone to school. And that did hinder their success because there's a lot of things you learn in a program that will save you a lot of time and put you in the best possible light. And it is also harder to find a following. If you're going to self-publish, it's much harder to get people to read your book. Not that my friends got self-published. They got published, but I know people have been self-published.
Well, what mistakes do they make, Chris?
Well, if you don't know, there's just certain things you learn in a writing program on storytelling, on narrative, how to work with other people, how to be collaborative, how to delegate, how to listen, how to write in a visual medium, how to write on a stage medium that you just don't get. When you can try, but you're going to make more mistakes. You'll eventually learn, but you'll learn at a slower rate. And also, it's just hard to find people to see your work because you're out there. I mean, for film, it's a little easier because you can send your film out to contests. But I would definitely say for theater, for playwriting, it's not as easy. I've seen people do it, but it's a lot harder. And I think for literary fiction, it's a lot harder. So Randall, let's just wrap this up and say, here are the things I think you should really consider, and we think you should consider when deciding your options. Number one, what can you afford, right? Because as we've said before, all of this costs money. Some of it costs what? The price of a book, Another of this is, a couple hundred at the price of an MA. Uh, do you have the time? What do you have the time for? Right? Do you think that's an important issue, Randall? What do you have the time for?
Well, I mean, you're gonna have to put in the time. I mean, you're gonna have to like, if you want to be a successful artist, you're gonna have to devote most of your life to it, and
Yeah.
it's gonna be painful. Everything's gonna suffer in your life.
Yeah. What circumstances do you perform best in? Some people really do better in a class. Some people do better in a degree program. And some people really do better just reading a book. What type of writing career do you want, right? And you don't have to be like what Randall said, I would argue. This could be a hobby. It doesn't have to be your calling. This could just be something you do for fun. Wallace Stevens, one of the greatest poets of the 20th century, made his living as an insurance salesman. T.S. Eliot supported himself by working in a bank. So you can be both a great normal person and make some good art. It's just a question of how much of your life do you want to give over. And in that sense, I think this is the trickiest question because I realize that when we're talking about schooling, certainly when we're talking about adult ed, all of my adult ed and all of your adult experiences have taken place in LA and New York City. And I'd be lying to you folks if I didn't say living in LA or living in New York City definitely gives you the edge. Wouldn't you say, Randall?
Maybe. I mean, I don't know,
You're
Chris.
gonna meet people. You're gonna have opportunities you just wouldn't have in Idaho. It's just a fact. Even your classes, your courses, everything is just gonna. Now that said, I had a bunch of neighbors about 10 years ago, and they were two brothers from Massachusetts. They had made an independent film, had gotten into a festival. They moved right next door to me. I'd go knock on their door. I'd see the cork board. They gave themselves a year. They went to everything, and then after the year, they didn't really get anywhere, and they went back to Massachusetts, where I'm sure they're very happy again. LA and New York are expensive cities, wouldn't you say, Randall?
Yeah, very expensive.
And they're not for everybody. I don't think they're great cities to start a family. I don't think they're a great city. They're not great. I love New York and LA, but if you live here, you're definitely not going to have a lot of the benefits you might have if you lived in a town with a more reasonable rent, more reasonable homes, and everything else. It's a more reasonable cost of living. So that's up to you. But again, I really hope that, I think we covered it, Randall, right? Is there anything left?
Well, I guess I just want to say that all paths to success for people that have like become very successful, they're always meandering. There's no like straight path. There's no like if you do A, B, you'll get to C. Uh, you know, every success story in entertainment, especially, is like there's no. It's always unique. There's no like yeah. So there's no. It's not linear. I mean, it's not like in the arts. It's not like being a lawyer. It's not like being a doctor. There's nothing linear about the arts.
Yeah. And if you're going to go training for anything in the arts, it's not going to be the same experience as going to law school or accounting school or medical school. It's not going to be the same thing as being an engineering major or Spanish major. It's not going to be, this is not like learning to cook French food and for the rest of your life. You can throw wonderful parties with great French cuisine. It is a speculative field, the arts. Almost every story I've ever heard of success has been very idiosyncratic and very particular to that individual. I have seen a lot of people here become famous. I've seen a lot of people here go home broken. Wow, that sounds so tough. Folks, if you have any questions that we didn't answer or you want to follow up with us in this episode, feel free. I will answer any question you have about adult ed programs, academic programs, or books, or online courses that we've taken. But I think we've covered it as best as we could. So thank you, Randall, as always. I'm Chris,
I'm Randall.
and we'll talk again. Bye.
Bye.